everybody. Happy Friday. This is State Senator Mallory McMorrow with another edition of This Week with Mallory, our live stream where we give you an update on what's happening in the state, what's happening in the legislature, sharing some good news from the district, and then taking questions if you have any. So we are going to dive right in because I know that it is still very snowy outside. So if people want to get out and go sledding or make a snowman, we want to make sure you have time to do that. So we're going to start first up with February is Black History Month. We will be sharing events and information all month long as we celebrate Black History Month. But first, wanted to share that on our Facebook page tomorrow, we are going to be resharing a virtual live stream that we did last year with Reggie Woolery, the Director of Education and Public Programs at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. It was a really wonderful segment. So we're going to re-air that this year. Check it out if you haven't seen it to get a virtual tour of the museum's Voting Matters exhibit. So make sure to tune in. And you can always come back anytime and watch them if you don't have a chance to view it live. Great to always check in with our video archive. Next up, speaking of snow, we know that the winter storm impacted a lot of people this week. And I don't know about where you live specifically, but where we are, the snow was really deceptive. It was very, very light, but consistent all day yesterday. It just kept coming down and coming down and coming down. So I think early on, I think a lot of people were looking at the snowstorm as a dud. But I can tell you, looking out right now, certainly was not. So we are sharing some resources for people if you need any assistance. We know that severe winter weather poses health and safety concerns with extremely cold temperatures, frozen pipes, potential propane shortages, and more, particularly for seniors. So if you need any support or resources, or you know anybody who's dealing with the effects of the winter storm this week, we're going to leave some information in the comments on our Facebook page. And then, as always, just a plug, I am going to drop a website link here. Check that out. So as always, go ahead and go to our website, sign up for our email newsletter if you're not already signed up already, where we follow up with these resources and links. And it's just a great way to have this information delivered right to your inbox so you don't have to watch these and take notes if you don't want to. All right, jumping into the updates from the Capitol. Great news this week. We shared on our pages yesterday. The tampon tax is officially no more in Michigan. So this was legislation that I have been working on since taking office to eliminate the sales and use tax on all menstrual hygiene products. So not just tampons, but all menstrual hygiene products. These are just fundamentally, it's about tax fairness, and this is a tax on products that half the population have to buy monthly throughout a significant portion of their lifetimes, and the other half do not. This was bipartisan legislation this year. It was signed into law. So as of yesterday, if you go buy menstrual hygiene products, they will not have taxes on them. So big win for us on a small thing, but it's a small thing that's really just simple and straightforward. And we were really proud to be a part of a lot of people who've worked for many, many years to get this done. Next up, we know that many of you have been asking this, so wanted to provide an update on red flag legislation. So I was the primary sponsor of a package of bills to create red flag laws here in the state of Michigan back in 2019 when I took office. Red flag laws would create a mechanism whereby a judge can order that firearms be temporarily confiscated from somebody who is deemed an immediate risk to themselves or others. We have worked for a long time with a lot of really good people on these bills. Ex-Representative Robert Wittenberg, now Oakland County Treasurer, started the Gun Violence Prevention Caucus here in the state of Michigan, has been working on these laws with a group of bipartisan individuals, including Sheriff Bouchard here in Oakland County, to make sure that these are really, really focused laws, that they account for an appropriate amount of due process, that there are steep penalties involved for people making a false report about somebody who is deemed an immediate risk to themselves or others. But, you know, we had a panel a few years ago in Berkeley with a number of people who've been impacted by gun violence. And a lot of this relates to, suicide, people who are really struggling And it is significantly more likely that somebody will be successful when attempting suicide if they have access to a firearm versus any other means. So obviously, in the wake of a horrific event like the Oxford school shooting, this is always a topic that we're going to be discussing is gun violence and gun violence prevention. But there's a lot of loss that happens and gun violence that happens every single day that doesn't make nearly as much headlines. So these were introduced, and I was joined by my colleagues, Senators Baer and Geis. And if enacted, Michigan would become the 20th state to enact red flag legislation. And this legislation has been proven to work in other states. And that's always a really good thing for us to be able to use as state legislators, is to see what other states are trying and see what works really well. So Senator Baer had a meeting with Senator Shirkey, Majority Leader Shirkey, this week, where he has agreed and has said multiple times on record that there will be a hearing on these bills. And that is incredibly important to us. I know she was asking about hearings for other bills that we have introduced, including safe storage laws to require that gun owners, if you live in a household with a minor, that your firearms be locked and secured so that a minor cannot access them, among other things in the package. So we will keep you posted, but I know some people were asking specifically about the red flag laws. So those have been officially reintroduced this term, and we hope for a hearing. We will keep people posted on more. Another bill that I introduced this week is on a completely different topic, which would allow for school districts, if they so choose, to be able to leverage their sinking funds to purchase EV school buses. Right now, that is not something that is eligible for purchase in sinking funds. Eagle, a couple of years ago, started a pilot program to allow some EV school buses here in the state, which is a really exciting pilot, not only just for the technology itself and kind of moving away from fossil fuels, but one of the things that has really driven home why this is exciting, particularly for school buses, is if you think about kids waiting for the bus at the end of the day, the lineup of buses, kids kind of waiting. Think about the height of a lot of kids and where the tailpipes are on buses. So a lot of those emissions, those tailpipe emissions, are coming out right at kids' face levels. So this is something that could potentially really improve air quality for our young people in our schools. And I have talked to school board members in our district, school districts themselves, who have said they would love to buy an EV school bus themselves. So this does not require anything. It just allows school districts, if they so choose, to use sinking funds to purchase an EV school bus. Finally, I also introduced a bill this week that would allow a legislator, like myself or anybody else, to vote by proxy if they are an active duty military member or if they are taking maternal or paternal leave after having a child, or if they are a caregiver who needs to take care of an immediate family member in the event of an emergency. So we know a lot of people were kind of paying attention to when I took maternity leave, right? I took 12 weeks of leave after having Noah. And that meant that I was out of session in Lansing for the 12 weeks. And the Michigan legislature currently does not have a mechanism for somebody like myself to vote on bills that are on the Senate floor if you are not physically present in the Capitol. There's a lot of reasons for that. A lot of people really believe in the tradition of physically being in person. But what my concern is, we also have a number of members who are active duty military. My colleague, Rosemary Bayer, has been very open about her husband having a stroke a couple of years ago and her needing to be there for him. And we also know just that the reality is more and more people are taking care of parents, are taking care of spouses or siblings or kids. And what I think is really important is that these voices and these experiences need to be represented in our legislature. I also heard from some of you when I took maternity leave who felt like you were underrepresented, that it was not fair that you did not have your legislator voting on your behalf. So my fundamental view is not that we should say that if you are somebody who needs to take leave because you have a family member that you need to care for, that you should not be eligible to have these jobs. My view is that we need to change the system to make sure that these experiences are reflected. These lived experiences are reflected in your legislature, because that's really how a lot of legislation is passed. We all bring our own lived experiences to these roles. There are a lot of security mechanisms in this bill. I think a lot of people are concerned about proxy voting and remote voting, that you may get somebody who never shows up to session. So this would have to include prior approval, announcements to constituents. There's a lot in there, but I am really hopeful for this bill. Moving forward, we'll be pushing for it because I think it will open the door for a lot of people who, frankly, we need in the legislature or in roles like this, who currently don't think they're eligible or don't even want to run, because they can't possibly imagine not being able to take that time if they need to serve their country or take care of an immediate family member. All right, now switching into good news, I will go ahead and share my screen. And once again, we will drop these links on our Facebook page, or put them in our e-news if you want to follow up with us afterwards, because I know this is probably pretty hard to read on the screen. But we wanted to share a list of events that are happening for Black History Month all throughout Oakland County. There are events in Birmingham, Farmington, Ferndale, Franklin, Pontiac, Rochester, Royal Oak. No shortage of events to learn about Black history, to celebrate Black History Month. So check them out. Just picking out one to start with if you are excited and want to get out there. One of the first events tonight, Baldwin Library is hosting one of their virtual lecture series, and you can tune in tonight at 7 p.m. All right. Next up, the Troy Community Foundation awards $7,500 to local organizations. The grants will be used for projects including an adaptive fitness program for individuals of all abilities, a music experience program for youth with special needs, a summer camp for at-risk kids in Troy, and free little libraries all around town. What you see here is Troy and Athens High School's first FRC Team 226 robotics team, the Hammerheads, received a $1,000 grant, which will be used to purchase STEAM program supplies. And that is science, technology, education, arts, and math. The Troy Community Foundation recently awarded grants to 12 local organizations, including the ARC of Oakland County, the Boys and Girls Club of Troy, Community Housing Network, the robotics team that you see here, My Youth Volunteering Alliance, Note Able Youth Ensemble, Oakland Literary Council, Troy Community Coalition, Troy People Concerned, Troy Historical Society, Troy Nature Society, and the Troy Public Library. So congratulations to everybody receiving those awards, and we can't wait to see what you do with these funds to help in the community. Last but not least, with a very appropriate winter picture here, there is a new tiger at the Detroit Zoo. The zoo announced this week that they have welcomed Amelia to the Devereaux Tiger Forest. You can see here playing in the snow. The tiger comes to us from Potter Park Zoo in Lansing. So going from one place where I work to the place that I live, which is fantastic. So welcome to Royal Oak from Lansing, Amelia. We are thrilled to have you, and really excited that you love snow, because we have a lot of it right now. All right, let me slide on over. That is our good news for the week. And with that, we are now on to our Q&A portion. So as always, bringing in Liz, our Director of District Services, who will go ahead and take your questions. We've had a few submitted this week using our question form, which is always exciting. But if you are watching live and you do have a question, regardless of what platform you're watching on, you can ask a question. Please type your name, if that's not immediately obvious with your username, what city you live in, and then go ahead and ask your question, and Liz will moderate them and get them answered. Liz, what do we got this week?
All right, we have 3 from our Submit Your Question forum, which I absolutely love. I get so giddy when people use that. So the first one is from Taylor and Troy. Said, are you familiar with nurse practitioners? Do you have any experience with nurse practitioners? And then are you against or for expanding nurse practitioner scope of practice, allowing them to practice independently without a collaborating physician?
Taylor, that is a great question. So yes, I'm very familiar with nurse practitioners. This is an issue that comes up every legislative term. And fundamentally myself, I am always looking for ways to expand access to care, especially affordable care, for more people in the state of Michigan. I know myself, as I have grown in my life, I have regularly used a nurse practitioner as my kind of primary care provider, and a number of times, because I know that they tend to have more availability. And that's really great, especially if you're kind of somebody who is pretty young. You want to have a regular check-in with a medical professional. So we're always looking at ways to expand that access. Legislation is typically always stalled out. And scope of practice is always really tricky, because anytime there is somebody who wants to expand their scope of practice, obviously the person who that scope of practice is kind of coming into is defensive about it, and there's a lot of negotiations that need to happen. That being said, we have seen some legislation move related to CRNAs, for example. That has been legislation that has been a long, long time in the works. Liz, I don't know if you remember how long the CRNA bills have existed in the legislature. I would say probably at least a decade
Yeah.
to expand scope of practice. So what I've learned in my time in the legislature is things get introduced, it starts the conversation, but it may take multiple sessions and potentially many years to come to a resolution, especially on things of scope of practice, because that really does require both sides, all sides, to come to the table, work out, and come to an amenable agreement. But I think everybody at the end of the day, at least in my mind, has the same goal, which is making sure all Michiganders have access to affordable, quality medical care regularly. I know how hard it is and how frustrating it is when you need to make a doctor's appointment and they're booked out for 2 months. So I hope that there is a resolution. It's legislation that we are always watching and taking a look at, but it's going to be something that has to be kind of agreed upon by both sides. I think that's when legislation like this is most effective, is when all stakeholders come to the table and agree, frankly, before the legislation even gets to the floor for a full vote. So we will be watching it as always, and would encourage, if this is something you are interested in, to reach out to those on the Health Policy Committee, who are always working on these issues, to make sure that your voice is heard as well. And that's always something that we tell constituents is, of course, email us to let us know what you think about certain legislation. But then if you know where a bill or an issue is in a committee, contact the committee chair. That's their role. When you're a chair of a committee, is you're responsible not only for your district, but that committee and all of the issues that come up. The committee chair is who sets the agenda. So that's always a step that we encourage our constituents to take to make sure your issues are being pushed to the front of the line.
All right, next question is from Rodney from Royal Oak. They said, please comment on the new Michigan redistricting maps and the pending challenges in the courts.
Rodney, thanks. So background on the Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission. This was a commission that voters created via a ballot initiative in 2018. I believe it was around 70% of voters voted to create this commission that takes the redistricting process out of the hands of the legislature and into an independent commission. So the commission was created. It is made up of 4 self-identified Republicans, 4 self-identified Democrats, 5 self-identified independents. I say that because in Michigan, you don't actually have to register with a party. So it did require people to self-identify. People were weeded out. If you were related to a legislator, if you had held in a position, you weren't eligible. And then each party saw the list of names of people that were picked to be on the commission. And my understanding was each party could, I think, eliminate at least 1 or 2 people kind of from the set if they saw a red flag and they're like, nope, I don't think that person is fair. So we got a commission. The commission worked for months to create new district lines. And what was cool about this, if you were nerdy like me and were directly impacted by it, is you could actually watch this process happen live. So super, super transparent. You could watch them quite literally draw maps live on YouTube. So on December 30th, they published the maps for Congress, State House, and State Senate. And I think they are a huge improvement over what we've seen in the past. And there's a lot of independent analysis that shows that. So I know Princeton has a redistricting review that they publish, and they show Michigan is kind of the leader of all of the independent commissions nationwide. But I will say, obviously, there's going to be challenges. There was a lawsuit filed by the Detroit caucus challenging the Voting Rights Act, saying that there was not an appropriate representation of Black candidates, Black voters in the maps. And that was thrown out yesterday by the state Supreme Court. So there are kind of mixed interpretations of how to interpret the Voting Rights Act, of whether or not creating districts that allow for minority candidates to elect their candidate of choice means specifically that it has to be an above 50% Black district, because there's also a law that says that you cannot pack voters into districts specifically by race. So it's a tough thing for the commission to wrangle, is how to reconcile those two things. And we'll see how it goes. So I think fundamentally, these maps are a huge, huge improvement over what we've had in the past. A perfect example is in 2014, the Republican Party got around 47%, I believe, of votes statewide, but had 72% of seats in the Senate. So the way that the maps were drawn was way off from where the state is. Michigan is a really, really purple state. It's almost a 50-50 split, Republicans and Democratic votes, when you look at statewide votes. And independent analysis of these maps, particularly as it relates to the state Senate, is about a 19-19 split. Now, some districts will flip, some districts will be competitive, some districts will change. That doesn't guarantee that it's going to be 19-19, but I think it gives a kind of playing field, if you will, where almost everybody, your vote is going to matter much more now, because there are more competitive districts. The districts are drawn in a way that is in line with statewide partisan fairness. And my hope is that it means that the legislation that moves through the legislature is more in line with where we know most people are. So I'm optimistic about it, and it's a pretty cool experiment that we get to see play out. And these are the maps that we're going to have for the next 10 years. So I'm going to be running in one of these maps. So it was kind of a interesting process to be watching, knowing that it directly impacts my future. But I really believe in the hearings that I did watch that all of the commissioners, this is a challenging thing to do, and I don't envy them for doing it, but I really do believe they were all trying to do right by what was written in the constitutional amendment. And it's a tough thing to do. But I feel good about it, and I'm optimistic about it, and we'll see how it goes this year.
All right. And then our last question from our Submit Your Question form was from Anthony. And I think it was more of a statement on their beliefs rather than a question, but I'll kind of take some liberty of my own to see what they're trying to get at. So if you're watching and want to expand, type it in the comments. But wanted to know if there's any update on any sort of hazardous pay for essential workers, I'm assuming for the pandemic and whatnot.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we've had a number of supplemental bills in our budget that has had hero pay or hazard pay for essential workers throughout the pandemic. But Anthony, if there is a specific piece of legislation or effort that you are referring to, please let us know, and we'll be happy to look into it and see what we're looking at in the legislature. I know that we are still waiting on another supplemental budget related to healthcare spending. So we'll see what that looks like, hopefully very, very soon.
All right. And that's all the questions that we have.
All right. Well, then I will let everybody. How snowy is it in Lansing, Liz?
Very snowy. Very snowy. It's still, the roads are still not in great condition, but they're getting better.
Yeah, it is deceptive. I know, right? Everybody was like, I thought it was going to be 18, 20 inches, and it might be less than that, but it's still slippery. So please, everybody, stay safe this weekend. Snuggle up at home if you want to. Go sledding. Liz, are you going to do anything in the snow this weekend?
No, but I am going to a dueling pianos thing tonight. I'm really excited about. Yeah.
Well,
love dueling pianos.
All right, Liz. I'll see
All right,
you later.
see you again.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to another edition of This Week with Mallory. And we hope you stay very, very safe and warm this weekend. And we will see you next time.